It's time to kick off new budgets and campaigns. You're deciding what media to double down on and what paid media to maybe leave behind. Let's kick off paid media in 2026 on today's episode of Closing Time. Thanks for tuning into Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Val Riley, head of marketing for Unbounce, Insightly, and LeadsRx. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Bland. He's a seasoned paid media strategist and co-founder of Omni Lab. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's just dig right in. I wanted to talk a little bit about seasonal pricing dynamics and how they play parts in the paid media game. For example, what trends did you maybe see towards the end of 2025, and what can we expect in Q1 of 2026? And I'm particularly interested in platforms like Google Ads and LinkedIn.
Yeah. I mean, I think we saw a lot of expected behavior to some degree, depending on how much you've spent on paid media. But generally speaking, we see CPCs and CPMs get inflated and spike around the end of September, beginning of September timeframe. When we were looking at data, I actually pulled some stats right before we got on, and I was looking at every one of the clients and brands we work with in the SaaS space, and we saw CPCs averaging around $3 at the beginning of 2025, and then now upwards of $13. Again, these are averages, right? We know that a lot of high-intent terms are much more expensive than that, but if you average everything out, obviously a huge increase just from a CPC's perspective. And I think we could all agree, while it's a leading indicator and not something that you theoretically report up to a CEO, all of those things impact downstream conversions, right? So you're looking at cost pers, right? From a SQL perspective, cost per op, CAC, the whole 9 yards. And so we really need to keep an eye on those things. So that was the big thing. And I think a lot of times this happens because, of course, we're all trying to find ways to, meet end of year goals, and we might be behind. And if we're behind, then we often throw a lot more budget behind something and say, hey, great, we've got to spend more dollars. Or two, we've got just extra budget left over and we want to spend it. And then there's the third, which is, we know a lot of people, a lot of times are either coming up on a contract and they're thinking about new vendors, new solutions, new things that are going on in the market for next year because they're in planning mode. And so it can be a great time to ultimately get people into a mode where they're evaluating software and looking at, looking whatever company you work for.
I love the fact that you use the example of, hey, this might be something to elevate to the CEO or might not, because I have seen this year and basically over the past 5 or 6 quarters, CPLs just getting to the point where it made our funnel just, stop working really, for lack of a better phrase. And I did have to elevate to the CEO and said, this is why the funnel is struggling in general. And it just feels like Google just keeps on raising those prices and saying, well, it's demand. But there's a point at which some companies just really can't afford to play the game anymore.
Yeah, I think there's that. And then, of course, we know that everything that's happening from an AI perspective, AI overviews have led to huge decreases in click-through rate. And so a lot of top of funnel traffic that we all used to get to our websites via those types of searches just isn't there anymore. And so people are a lot of times going to LLMs, or they're getting those answers directly from AI overviews or now AI Max. And so I think, I don't have data confidently to say this, but it seems pretty obvious what's going on when you look at just general cost structures and also patterns across a lot of our clients that we're working with, that a lot of people have moved budget from lower intent terms to higher intent terms over the last year or two. We've traditionally always been focused on high intent, and I think it's not a new thing per se, but when you start to get budget consolidation on terms that just have simply less volume, like cybersecurity software versus cybersecurity or other general terms, or what is cybersecurity or how do I get protected, clearly you're going to get increased costs from that, so you've got more competition on it. So I think there's that. The other thing too, to say one last thing on it, is that you've got also privacy regulations getting tougher and more stringent as well. And I think tracking has gotten more difficult, and you can already see from vendors like CookieYes and others, acceptance rates on cookie consent forms. And so those are really, really important to sending data back to Google. And so I think oftentimes if you're only leveraging in platform data to look at cost pers or efficiency metrics, they can honestly be a little bit misleading from a conversion perspective because you're not capturing as much data as you were before, especially with European types of campaigns. So some other things to consider as well. But yeah, it's definitely tough out there on Google. There's no doubt.
So you mentioned the high intent terms versus low intent terms. Is that how you're coaching clients in terms of what you're moving away from for 2026 and what you're embracing? Or are there other things that you're seeing that you're looking at as your clients look to invest in the year ahead?
Oh, 100%. I mean, we've been, I guess, doing this agency for the last 5 or 6 years, and pretty much since the inception, it's always been high intent. So that'll always be our line related to Google Ads, simply because usually Google is used as a bottom of the funnel channel, and people see it as more direct response performance marketing. And so we don't want to spend a whole lot of budget on terms that are more built around awareness and instead shift that budget over to social channels. So yeah, I would always advocate to invest as many dollars on the high intent side, either non-brand or competitor, before doing anything on the low intent side. But there is a reality that the unit economics potentially might not make sense for that brand. And so there have been some instances too where we've had to walk away from Google as a channel. It's just simply too expensive based upon the pricing model of the brand. And they can either decide to make a pricing decision and reprice their product so that CAC gets, in more line with LTV, or they simply say, hey, there's other channels where I can reach my audience more effectively, and Google's not one of those. And I think it's really good to be agnostic from our side, where I'm not attached to Google by any stretch. We just want to find the best channels that ultimately work and drive the best efficiency. But, again, Google's Google, and it's got the intent versus any other channels. So it's sometimes tough to pull away from.
Yeah, I would say I think every paid media manager or every CMO looking at the budget for 2026 has had that thought, like, is this a channel that we really need, because it is getting exorbitant. But let's talk about something a little more fun. Let's talk about creative. Are there trends that you're seeing in creative for paid media, specific formats, messaging, or approaches that we can look for in 2026?
I'll say something that I think is top of mind for, I think, a lot of people, but I think far less are actually doing it. But when we talk about LinkedIn, I mean, we've all heard of thought leader ads, or a lot of us have, right? Organic posts that are promoted. They are still the number one ad format for us, not only as an agency, but for all the brands we work with. The engagement rates are 5 to 6 times anything that you would see on any other type of ad format. And oftentimes the conversion rate is even better than sometimes the other formats. And so, we have a huge pull for any brand that we work with where, hey, we need to have at least a handful of thought leader ad campaigns running, because it's a native look and feel, right? I mean, it's what people are used to engaging with when they get on the newsfeed. And so when they start scrolling, looking through things, it's a natural thing to engage with a human versus a company. And so I think that's why they get such great engagement. But also they put a face next to the brand. And I think often brands want to hide behind the logo and not get someone out there into the world that actually represents the brand. It doesn't have to be the founder. It could be an SME, or it could even be someone external. But that's a big one, thought leader ads. I did pull some data, and I was looking at it earlier because we pulled literally all 2025 data. We've been doing some look backs on all ad formats. The CTR in terms of best CTR is still single image ads, hands down at 0.72%. And I think it's also one of the most popular used formats because it's the easiest to get going on. And then the best conversion rate, which actually surprised me a bit, was carousels at 2.96%, which didn't make as much sense to me. I mean, carousels are not used as much, and often they're typically formats that are a little bit better for in-channel consumption where people might swipe through something. But we still found that they performed a lot better. And this, again, is aggregated across all conversions, not just high intent, but also low intent too. So those are two things, at least, that we've seen from an ad format perspective.
Nice. I'm going to put that carousel on my list, I think. And I do agree with you with the thought leader ads. It does feel often that you often don't realize you're consuming an ad. And I think that's what makes it so such a positive experience, but also it doesn't feel like an exchange at all. It just feels like I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm doing that within LinkedIn, which is what I've come for. So excited to see how more people can work those into their mix.
You said something really smart there at the end, which is why they're coming to LinkedIn, why they're logging in. I think that's really smart because I think often, we're in this mode of we want everyone to demo or sign up for our product or start a trial, whatever the CTA is. But the reason that people come to LinkedIn is not to evaluate software. I mean, no one has the mindset of, hey, I'm looking for something, or they don't type into the search bar, cybersecurity platform or whatever the product category is. They're looking to learn something new, to connect with friends, to engage with stuff, to waste time between meetings, look for a job. I mean, things like that. And so I think to your point, with thought leader ads, knowing the intent behind why the person's even on the platform is one of the reasons that thought leader ads get more engagement, because generally speaking, at least most of the posts that, we're promoting, 99% of them are not direct response like, hey, we do audits, get our audit for free type of thing, click the CTA below. It's much more narrative based, talking about the problem, practical tips, tricks, like things like that are actually legitimately helpful. So I think it's a really good point you mentioned there.
So another question that many brands have, I'm sure you get asked this all the time when you're engaging with a client, with a new client. How much should they be doing monitoring what competitors are doing and learning from what competitors are doing on paid media? And are there specific tools or practices you have around competitor paid media monitoring?
Right. This may be a bit controversial, but at least in the paid sphere, I'm not a huge proponent of doing a lot of competitor research. I think when you think about competitor research from a positioning or pricing perspective, or just understanding who's in the space from a product marketing lens, clearly I think there's advantages to doing that and understanding how your competitors are positioning themselves against you. But as it relates to paid, I think that the focus really should be on the customer at the end of the day. And a perfect example is, we know there's SpyFu and Ahrefs and other tools like that out there where you can clearly do keyword research. And that would be a common thing for someone to say, hey, Val, can you tell me who XYZ company's bidding on? Maybe we should bid on those keywords too. And I think directionally it can be somewhat interesting. Maybe there's some opportunities that you missed out on. But honestly, we don't know how those keywords are performing. One, they could be wasting tons of money on them and they may not be a perfect fit. We don't really know if the ICP is exactly aligned with your ICP. The stage of company, stage of growth and where they are as a company might be different than you. They also might not even be intentionally trying to bid on those terms. They may have someone that's not managing the account, whether in-house or out-of-house, well, or maybe there's broad match being used or something like that on Google or an AI-based campaign type. And so you're looking at all the juicy details and saying, well, wait a minute, they're bidding on XYZ. That may be something we should go after. So I think things like that, I think are directionally interesting. I just wouldn't put a lot of faith in them at all. And I think it's really better to focus on and say, hey, how are customers describing our product? What are they saying on sales calls related to problems or different capabilities they're looking for? What are the words that they use to find our stuff? I think that's way more impactful because you're going to better align with ultimately how the customer's searching and what they're looking for. And then obviously be really locked into, your ICP versus someone else's.
That's always been my philosophy. I'm glad we're aligned there. I always call it keep your eyes on your own paper because it might be interesting what's going on over there, but there's a lot behind that maybe we don't know. So
exactly.
Appreciate
it's
that
interesting.
Insight.
It's no doubt interesting.
So I wanted to go a little bit deeper on two specific angles because they both happen to be present in the organization that I work for. And so first I'd like to talk about Insightly, which is a CRM. CRM, perhaps the most competitive SaaS category that there is, long-term players, big budgets. And so there might be other people listening who are in the same position as Insightly, that we are a challenger brand in a very competitive industry. So when you're approaching a client that is a challenger brand in a highly competitive space, what are some typical approaches that you have that can help them have success in paid media?
First thing I'd say is don't do what other big brands do. Is a general rec. I know we love to look at the big dogs of the software SaaS world or whoever the category leader is and say, well, they're doing it. It must be a good idea. But you've got to be different somehow. And that could be maybe a different capability, a different pricing structure, could be just a different segment that you're going after. What I found in something interesting, I saw an ad just last night on Instagram, and it was something like AI agentic platform for everyone, or for something broad, like that was the headline. And, my takeaway from it was, all right, great. I don't know really what it does. Okay, AI agentic. I don't know really who it's for. And so you kind of come away with that thinking, all right, yeah, great. It's just another, broad-based ad. I think the example I would think about with Insightly as compared to HubSpot and Salesforce is, those are the juggernauts of the CRM space, clearly. And they're going after pretty much anyone and everyone. HubSpot maybe leaning a little more SMB mid-market, Salesforce leaning a little bit more enterprise. But for me, for you all, or for any brand that's, obviously, not the category leader per se, the first name that comes to mind is, how do we get more specific on messaging, whether it be through advertising, our website, or specific pages that relate more to a segment that's potentially underserved? And so, Salesforce has obviously a lot of people working at it, but I'm sure there are underserved markets where you could come in and have a more prescriptive solution or module in your product that better serves that market that's just not being met. And so you could learn about that through reviews on G2 and Capterra or Reddit threads. There's other tools and platforms that aggregate this information together where you can get some of those insights. But for me, it would be like, how do we get more specific? Because often, most of the ads and even things on, their landing pages are so general. It's like, a CRM that works, a CRM that drives revenue, a CRM that, so on and so forth. And so again, I think like getting specific and getting really practical on the use case really opens people's eyes to saying, oh, wait a minute, oh, this is for me. So I think that those are some of the ways that I would think about standing out. That rolls up to your creative question, messaging question too. Same exact principles apply there.
And let's look at the other side. So we also have the Unbounce brand, Unbounce landing page builder, brand leader, category leader, almost synonymous with landing pages. So the strategy differs quite a bit when you're approaching a client who is leading the brand. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's not often you're in that position. So often we're always battling the category leader because there's so few, right, per each category. But yeah, I think, ultimately you're in a position of defending, brand and staying top of mind and being competitive against other people that are out there. And so for me, it's really just doubling down on existing messaging. You've got probably more resources and more budget that a lot of the smaller brands do because you are the first brand that comes to mind. And so for me, it's about maximizing mental availability in the minds of people that are out of market, because you now are already top of mind with lots of people, but there are now other options. And so it's really about how do we continue to stay top of mind and maintain market share, because we know that people can forget, new brands are coming up. They're going to be spending more money trying to find creative ways to upend Unbounce and get you guys out of the way. And so for you all, for me, it's how are you guys staying innovative and what are you offering that's new, great, and exciting that we should get excited about? And then, how do we get really clear on the offering and stay top of mind in a really memorable and emotional way so that, again, when they do have a need for a landing page builder like Unbounce and all the other things it does, they're thinking Unbounce only, or at least they're in the top 3 consideration set. So yeah, it's definitely a different game. You have the luxury of, making, I think, a lot more mistakes when you're in that position. When you're a upstart brand and you're trying to, make a name for yourself, I think it's much harder. Marketing is a totally different game. But I'd be curious of your thoughts too. You're in that world way more than I am. And I think often we're working with brands that are not the sales forces of their category. And so it's much easier to answer the latter, but anything that you found that is more effective or things that you guys are focused on for 2026, I'd wonder.
I will tell you the theme for our team, and we're a pretty small marketing team with both of these brands, right? This challenger brand and this market leading brand. And so the theme is definitely just context switching all day, every day. As we're working on campaigns for Unbounce, we have that lens that you just mentioned. We're defending, we're talking about our new features. We're, reinforcing that you're making the right decision by going with the market leader. And then we change our hats very quickly. And, as Insightly, it's kind of fun being the challenger brand sometimes because you can punch up a little bit. You can, make a little fun. You can be a little edgy. You can be a little bit more creative. You have a little bit more leeway. So in some ways, being the challenger brand is a little more fun, and being the category leader can be a little bit, your hands are tied a little bit more. So without giving away too much of the secret sauce, I might leave it at that. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today. If folks want to learn more about you or OmniLab, where should they go?
Easiest place is to type in Jonathan Bland in LinkedIn. I think I'm one of the only ones, but OmniLab, if there's two or multiple out there. And then omnilabconsulting.com is where you can find us. We do paid media for SaaS brands, ad creative, and even conversion tracking analytics to get everything wired. And we're really focused on ultimately making sure that we drive pipeline for the brands we work with. So yeah, that's where you can find us.
Thank you so much. I'll just reinforce our conversation on our pre-call was so insightful. So really, I was incredibly impressed with your understanding of SaaS in general and paid media for SaaS. So definitely check Jonathan out. He's a great follow on LinkedIn.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And thanks to all of you for tuning into this week's episode of Closing Time. Remember, you can get this episode and every episode delivered right to your inbox if you click the link in the show notes. And we'll see you next week.